But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
This college, which is Moshe Medizada. Will you please just go ahead. Now, this meeting, or this candidates forum, is technically a meeting of the California Democratic Party African American Caucus, so I'm going to bring our chair, the Honorable Darren W. Parker, up to open this meeting and to welcome you. Thank you.
Well, good morning. Good morning. So I don't like that microphone. They don't give me my very wide attraction without that. I just don't feel comfortable unless I'm able to have that effect. God bless me with this voice, and I love using it. So, my name is Darren Parker. I am humbled to be the chairman of the California Democratic Party African American Caucus. As a matter of fact, I am in my 6th term, being the longest consecutively elected caucus chair in state party history. So it's been an honor to make sure that our caucus not only talks about the issues that are important at the state party level, whether it's at an e-board meeting or convention, but it has been our goal to make sure that we actually come out into the community and not just come around election time, but we're here as part of every community, so you don't have to worry about us showing up because we're a party. And if you've ever seen this California Golden Bear, that's green, black, and red, you know that many people are members of the caucus, and it is a certain way that you have to achieve getting this bear, and it's usually by your good works. And Scripture says that we are blessed with good works, so those individuals that truly put in effort in their community, regardless of what they look like, we try to make sure that they're recognized and that we present them with a California bear. So, since no one came as far as, did anyone from Lancaster, California, did anyone fly with me this morning? Okay, is anybody from Compton, California?
Here.
Are you from Compton?
Yeah.
All right.
I went to high school there.
That's what I'm talking about. I ask those questions because, again, when you talk about a statewide organization, a lot of times people are just allowed to talk. This caucus is not about talk, it is about action, it is about being a part of the community. So I recognize my good brother from Compton, California. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We don't usually have many of us in the audience, but I proudly hail from Compton, California, and I say that because it used to be an area that was demonized. And to undemonize things, you need to see a face. So if ever you hear about anyone from Compton, California, before you listen to the rest of the news, think of my face. All right. We want to welcome the candidates and thank you for taking the time for appearing here in our community meeting. As Mr. said, I want to officially call this meeting to order. And in doing that, I want to first recognize the Vice Chairman of the California Democratic Party African American Caucus, Ms. Tanisha Brown. Logistically, she came further than I did. She came from San Diego. So she flew up from San Diego. She's not from Compton, so I just go to Compton first. She flew up from San Diego, but it just shows that we make sure that our officers represent all parts of the state of California, so Central, North, South, and of course Southern California. We make sure that that officer makeup is, so we're in every part of every community. So with your permission and without objection, I will call this meeting to order. We are the only caucus in the state party that takes advantage of going into the community and having our caucus meetings in the community. We're pushing the other 19 caucuses to follow our direction, but I think the best way is always to lead by example. So I am humbled by the number of people that came out today that didn't know where the signs were, like us, we're long time in campus. But what a beautiful campus to be lost in, y'all. Come on. California requesting right away a babbling brook. Every one of them, I think now we need a little brook because that was just beautiful. Thank you once again for coming, and I'll turn this back over to Mr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for that welcome. Now, because we are in the city of San Pablo, I am very happy to be able to have Councilmember Arturo Cruz come up and welcome us on behalf of the city of San Pablo. Mr. Cruz.
Welcome everybody, good morning. Our wonderful city here in San Pablo. Sorry that the microphone doesn't work. To all the candidates. I know you guys do a wonderful job for our community.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Next, I would like to call up, since we are at the college, Mr. John Marquez. Mr. John Marquez is the first Latino to serve on Richmond City Council, and currently he represents this ward on the Contra Costa Community College District. And I have a special effect for him, or appreciation for him, because he used to be my daddy's boss. So come on up here.
I'll take a lead from the gentleman from the state. I want to welcome all of you. My name is John Marquez, and I'm the Secretary of the Board of Trustees of the Contra Costa Community College District. And I want to, and I represent Ward 1, which is this area. And this is one of the reasons I always take possession on this campus. Welcome to my college. And people wonder why I say thank you. People wonder why I say that. This is where I started my educational experience. In my political experience as a student activist back in the 60s. So when I come back up here now and I see all the changes, all the different buildings, the buildings that were here are no longer here, the new ones are here. I welcome all of you here. And again, to all the candidates, I wish you all luck. I've been where you've been, not at this level, but I know everybody's nervous, but I know you're in good hands with this wonderful audience. Thank you very much.
And last but not least, we would like to welcome our county supervisor, an outstanding guy, Mr. John Joy.
Good morning. So for the last 19 years, I've had the pleasure of representing the Contra Costa County side of this assembly district. So how many of you from Alameda County will cross over to our side of the line? Okay. Welcome to Contra Costa. And, you know, those of us, you know, this is a very progressive district. We're proud of that. And let me just say to the Alameda County side, you know, you have nothing on Contra Costa. We have great activists on our side of the line. But really what's great is that this is a great assembly district because, you know, the Oakland, Berkeley, Richmond, El Cerrito, you know, the San Pablo, can't forget San Pablo, that, you know, our I-80 corridor really has a strong community of interest. And we work together on so many issues. And it's really great to have this turnout. My understanding is this is the first candidate debate in Contra Costa for this. So thank you to the African American Caucus of the California Democratic Party here. And thank you for coming up from Southern California. You're going to be partial toward the Contra Costa side as you get to know us. But I just want to say, I think we are really fortunate to have such a really great group of candidates running for this. I mean, everyone, you know, everyone has their choices right now. Some do, some don't, right? Some of you are undecided, some are not. But what's great is we have a pretty vibrant, robust process. And we have great candidates who are doing work around the East Bay, and we're going to get to hear from them today. There are going to be differences, right? There are going to be some similarities. But I know I'm really proud of West County and all the activism we've had on so many issues working with the Alameda County side. So thank you for being here, and thank you to all the candidates for being here and for the African American Caucus.
And because we have so many dignitaries in the room, we would be remiss if we did not acknowledge them. So right now, I would like to invite Joey Smith. Joey Smith, she is the first Vice President of Black Women Organized for Political Action, Richmond Contra Costa County Chapter, to do acknowledgments. Thank you, Joey.
Sound, so please pardon my back. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for sharing your Saturday morning with us. You didn't have to, but you did. That lets us know that you are engaged in the political process and you are civically alert and astute, and that is exactly what we appreciate in Buapa. Acknowledging everyone who is here, I'm not going to go over those who have already been acknowledged, but I would like to include the people who are not sitting up here because you'll have your chance. Okay, but starting off with our Mayor Pro Tem for the City of El Cerrito, Mr. Gabriel Quinto. We've got the Chair of the Contra Costa County Democratic Central Committee, Madam Maria Alegria. Berkeley Rent Board, Igor Trigel. City Council Member for the City of Richmond, Melvin Willis. Former Mayor of the City of Hercules, Jerry McQueen. Vice Mayor of the City of Hercules, Chris Kelly. If I have missed anyone, please raise your hand, stand up, and tell us your name and your current elected position.
Fidelity City of El Cerrito, City Council.
Former Mayor, former City Council member, City of Hercules.
Community College Board of Governors member. Griffin. Greg Enholm, I like Trustee Marquez am on the Contra Costa Community College Board. We represent the entire county. I represent East County for myself.
Featuring South the President of the Teachers Union.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, everyone. If I missed you, it's because I did not see you. It's not intentional. Congratulations on your position and your representation here. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joey. I just want to acknowledge Hakeem Brown. He's one of the regional directors for the African American Caucus. He just walked into the room. We're almost to the questions for candidates. I would like to bring up Mr. Uche Uwahimu next. He is going to introduce our esteemed moderator.
My glasses.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Uche Uwahimu, I'm the Regional Director of the Democratic Party African American Caucus. And thank you for coming this morning. So first I will introduce the timekeeper for this event today. The timekeeper is Cheryl Lane. So I'll give you a brief bio. Cheryl is a native Richmond, California citizen. She's passionate about community engagement and has worked on public policy issues that impact lives and events in our community. One of the passions she has is finding solutions to problems, not just looking at problems without finding solutions. She has actually looked at ways we can better our community through education, through safe neighborhoods, and through security, financial security, which is actually her daily job. She's the policy director for EARN. EARN is a national non-profit focused on increasing financial security for low or moderate income households. She previously directed the Richmond Equitable Development Initiative at the Urban Habitat and served as a staff of the former mayor of San Jose and as a community relation aide and policy analyst. Cheryl holds a master's degree in science in urban policy management from the Milano Graduate School of Management and Urban Policy at the New School in New York City. She also holds a BA on sociology and another in psychology. Cheryl, those BA degrees are from UC Oregon, so if you're from UC Oregon, this is an online. And then for 8 years, Cheryl served as commissioner for Richmond Planning Department. 5 of those years, she was the chair of that planning commission. So without further delay, I'll introduce you our thank you for the chair of men. Now, for many of you that do not know, Paul Cobb is one of our African American leaders, not just in the Bay Area, but across the country. So I'll give you a brief bio of Paul. Paul grew up in West Oakland. He attended Howard University, where I grew up, from Washington, D.C. He spent many years in the Southern Civil Rights Movement. Then he returned to the Bay Area, where he was a founding member of Afro-American Association. If you are not familiar with Afro-American Association, this was the organization that gave birth to the Black Panther. So Mr. Cobb was part of that movement. Paul established in Oakland, if you are familiar with OCOR in Oakland, that's the Oakland Citizens Committee for Urban Renewal. He was one of the founding members of that organization. Paul went on to work as a staff of Oakland Post, Oakland Tribune, and served on the school board before purchasing actually the Oakland Post. He is the founder, not really the founder, but currently he is the publisher of Oakland Post, which publishes 7 newspapers across the Bay Area. In fact, Oakland Post is one of the largest African American newspapers across the country. So, without further delay, let me introduce you to my good friend here, who is also a mentor to me. His name is Mr. Paul Cobb.
Okay, thank you, Uche, and thank you, Mr. Phillips. What a name. I wish I had that name when I was going door to door in the South registering voters, so white people could have said Mr. Cobb. I'd like to acknowledge Cheryl, our timekeeper. Here in your resume, you're the most qualified timekeeper in America. I want to thank and acknowledge Darren Parker and Tanisha Brown for hosting and helping to sponsor this event. Hopefully, the media service, and with you being a statewide organization, the results of the debate and the questions and the answers can be carried forth throughout the state to be published in African American newspapers and Latino publications throughout the state, and hopefully we can work together to let the seed that is being sown here today show that the issues that concern the Black community concern all of the residents of California. So thank you again for putting this on. I would like, since I'm a member of the media, I would like to introduce my wife, who is the co-owner of the Open Post. Gabe Cobb is executive director of the private newspaper. We also have Radio Free Richmond here. I think John is present. You want to raise your hand?
It actually means dog.
Don, okay. And this is being broadcast on Facebook Live. It also, the Post News Group will be streaming selected portions on the website. As he said, we publish not 7, but 9 newspapers, and we are circulated in 700 houses of worship every Sunday morning, in all public buildings as well. We also publish El Mundo, our Spanish language newspaper, which we've owned for 53 years, and the remarks of the candidates will all be given, and I want all of you to take note of this, will be given equal space, free of charge, to present a synopsis of your views as the coverage of the campaign goes forward. So make sure that your public relations secretaries and press releases get to us so we can continue that coverage. The ground rules for this presentation will be the candidates will have 2 minutes each for opening statements, and the candidates will have at least 1 minute to answer questions. The candidates will have 1 minute each for closing statements, and the candidates will receive a 30-second warning from the most qualified timekeeper in America. So stay in your lane. Okay. The candidates will also receive a signal to stop talking, and it will be a very articulate signal, spelled correctly with the word stop, S-T-O-P. And candidates will be asked to stop talking immediately. All questions will be asked by the moderator. All candidates will receive the same questions, and all candidates will have the opportunity to answer at least one question first, which means we will start with Ms. Appel, and the second question will go to Mr. Bartlett, and so forth. So each candidate will get a chance to be the first to answer a question. And then the closing statements, we will begin with Buffy will be the first person to make a closing statement, and the audience is asked to reserve your applause until after the last closing statement. Thank you for the water. Each one of you have been given water, and so we will begin with the opening statement from Ms. Appel.
Good morning, everyone. And I want
If you don't use the microphone, it's not going to be recorded at all.
Okay, so wait on the time.
You didn't tell me that part.
Good morning, everyone, and I want to thank all of our hosts. When I joined the school board 5 years ago, I felt a punch in my stomach every time that one of the young people came in front of us for expulsion or came back to us after being in continuation school. And I realized that every one of those students had been impacted probably forever for some mistakes that they made. And for me, that was a further indication, further juice that built on the conviction that got me on the school board in the first place and that has led me for the last 25 years to be working for social change. Working with the Coalition on Homelessness with homeless people in the streets and parks to decriminalize homelessness and come up with exits to poverty. Working at the Drug Policy Alliance as a founding member of the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights for criminal justice reform, sentencing reform, initiatives for treatment instead of incarceration, and addressing the collateral consequences of the failed war on drugs. And working for 10 years with our family coalition so that LGBTQ families throughout this state can live with dignity and equality. And always, always for public schools and public students. First as a parent organizer, and then as on the California School-Based Health Alliance to bring health to children where they are in our schools, and now in my second term on the school board. We have a lot of work left to do, but there's a lot that we've done. Working with our teachers, with our communities, with my fantastic colleagues, we're working to close the achievement gap. I have taken the lead on building restorative justice in our schools and building career technical education to give students engaged opportunities to learn and find a job. And yes, this year we haven't had a single expulsion in front of us, and I'm proud of that. I am going to bring the conviction and the drive that I have spent for the last 25 years with and for this community and the people of California to Sacramento as your next Assemblywoman, and I hope that you will join me.
So in the interest of time, we want to introduce each speaker. Just pass the mic when you're finished, so because we're running a few minutes behind.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for coming this morning, Saturday morning, you know, the challenge. My name is Ben Bartlett, and I'm running for State Assembly because everyone in the East Bay deserves a home. Now that's my slogan, but it's also my belief. Because you see, a few years ago, my mother was displaced. And she's a fourth-generation native. And if it happened to her, it could happen to anyone. So I decided to get involved and make it so no other family endured what our family went through. So who am I? I'm a fifth-generation native of the East Bay, the son of a Black Panther. I come from a long line of people that have been doing it and making it happen for the people. I'm also a community leader and have been my entire adult life. Been on boards and commissions. And in that capacity, I've banned plastic bags. I've repatriated soldier children in Africa. Soldiers in Africa. I'm also an environmental lawyer. Well, I make good green jobs. And now in City Council, it's been quite a year. We have introduced, from my office, many groundbreaking legislations, including prefabricated microunits for the homeless, paid family leave, streamlined affordable housing, housing retention, electric vehicle charging ordinances, anti-displacement public advocate, first in the nation, I should say, racial equity in city contracting, divesting from Trump's border wall, divesting from ICE and all the subcontractors that do religious and ethnic registries, community benefits ordinance, funding police body cameras, creating the African American Holistic Resource Center, ADU streamlining and finance, and the youth homeless and workforce development policy. So I'm proud of those accomplishments, but let's be honest here. It's a small sliver of what we can do. These problems are regional, and they need regional solutions. So that's why I'm running. With your help, we can make the East Bay a home for everyone. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. As they said, it's really wonderful to be able to stand up here before you, you people who are engaged in this political democratic process. My name is Javonta Beckles. I'm the Vice Mayor of Richmond. Remember these words: proven track record. I have the longest proven track record of standing up and advocating for my community of Richmond, which is a community of majority people of color. I have a proven track record of standing up to improve the quality of life for my community of Richmond. For the 7 years that I've been on that city council, the first thing I did when I got on that city council was to ban the box. Working in conjunction with the Safe Return Project, we created the most progressive, innovative ban the box ordinance in the country. In my record, in my time, 7 years on the Richmond City Council, we have raised the minimum wage. By 2018, we will have $15 an hour for our residents. I fought to keep Doctors Hospital open. I fought to hold Chevron accountable because of the toxins that they rain down in our community of color. I fought to keep Kennedy High open. I fought together with the community. We have, for the first time in 30 years, the first rent control in the state. And that's how I operate. And that's how I will operate. I will serve you. I will stand up to you because I am a corporate-free candidate. You can trust me. I will be beholden only to you and not the corporations. And with people power, which is what my campaign, our campaign has, this is about a movement. And together, we can take back our government with a corporate, people-powered candidate. Thank you very much.
I'm an Oakland City Council member. I want to thank the sponsors for hosting this for us, all of you here, and thank you all for showing up. It's good to be in San Pablo. My mother lived in San Pablo for 9 years, so I'm familiar with the city, and I've been here for many times. She passed away a couple years ago, but I do know San Pablo pretty well, and it's nice to be back here once again. I'm running on my record of experience and accomplishments. I'm a second-term City Council member. I have nearly 30 years of policy and organizing experience, including 10 years actually in Sacramento, driving legislation on critical bills, critical issues, including renewable energy. My experience in Oakland is, Oakland Magazine has said I'm the most effective member of the Oakland City Council and that my record of accomplishments is unmatched. And those are their words, and I'm very honored to receive those words. When community groups and activist organizations wanted to put together police reform that they've been working on for 10, 15 years or so and get something passed, they came to me to get it done. We now have a police commission for the very first time, a police oversight commission in the city of Oakland because of the work I did with an activist coalition, with experts, with our city attorney. It's one thing to have an idea, it's one thing to have a good idea or to care about an issue. It's another thing to be able to actually take that to an actual policy position and to actual legislation that gets it passed and gets implemented. That's something I'm very good at. When Tenants' Rights Coalition wanted to get a tenant protection ordinance passed in Oakland, at that time only 4 cities in the state had it, they came to me to make that happen. One of the reasons I'm running, there are many reasons, one of the reasons I'm running is because I know that being an effective state legislator, it's not about glitz and glory and high profile this and press releases and so on. It's about a lot of good, hard, often behind the scenes, tedious work on very complex and very important policy matters. And that's something I'm very good at. I've had experience to show that, a record in Oakland, a record in Sacramento, and I want you to consider that record, and I ask for your support. And my time is up. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Andy Patson. I'm running for the Assembly because we need an experienced leader with a proven track record of taking on and winning tough fights. And that's something that I've done in the community, both for the East Bay as a whole, as well as in my home city of Berkeley. I'm in my 3rd term on the East Bay Municipal Utility District Board of Directors. And in that role, I've ensured that we've had clean, reliable drinking water, that we've ensured that we have affordable policies for all of our customers. During the foreclosure crisis, I made sure that when big banks tried to kick out and evict tenants during that foreclosure crisis, I made sure that we put a stop to that by changing state legislation, even persisting in the face of Governor Schwarzenegger's vetoes, to make sure that we could protect all of us from being able to stay in our homes and have the right to water. Also looked at our affordability and made sure that we could expand eligibility for our low-income rate assistance from simply the poverty line to double the poverty line. It was very important to me that we persisted through multiple budget cycles for me to convince my board that was a value that our residents should have equal rights to. As a workers' rights attorney,
I fight every day for people who've been impacted by workplace discrimination, retaliation, unsafe workplaces, and wage theft. I see who slips through the cracks, and I see what needs to be changed, specifically in the law. And I'm running for the legislature to make sure that we can expand the services for health and human services, make sure that we have single-payer health care, that we protect our environment. I fought for climate protection, lobbied the state legislature for essential health benefits and clean air and clean energy. And I'm running for the legislature to carry on these fights and make sure that we represent our progressive values in the 15th Assembly District. Thank you.
My name is Rochelle Pardue-Okimoto. I serve on the El Cerrito City Council. What would you do if you weren't afraid? I asked myself that question. I stand before you today and I'd let you know that I was a black baby born into a white family and a drug-addicted mother. And that I had to come to terms with that. I tell you that even though I had a rough beginning, my mom is actually someone who I really look up to, because no matter how far you go down the wrong track, you can always turn around and do the right thing. My grandparents taught me that if you stand up, if you believe in yourself, you can accomplish anything that you want to. And I've always believed that. So I stood up, and I worked hard in school. And I went to college, and I got my degree, and I ran hard, and I ran fast away from the poverty that I had begun with. And when I finally got to my middle-class lifestyle, I felt this unease, because I knew that even though I had made it out, there were still people behind me, still in that situation. And I knew that if I didn't reach back and bring other people along with me, then what good was it for me to be where I am? I've spent the last 17 years as a nurse at Alta Bates Hospital, and I've seen a sharp and steady decline in the access to health care. The closure of Doctors Hospital, the pending closure of Alta Bates Hospital. Where would you go today if you had a heart attack? The closest is Summit Hospital in Oakland. We need single-payer health care now. Everybody needs to be taken care of. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Owen Poindexter, and I'm in this race because I think that for all the wonderful work we're doing here in California, we're failing our citizens. And I know that we're failing our citizens because 20% of people in California are below the poverty line. Another 20% are near poor. And millions more live in constant economic insecurity, where if one thing goes wrong, they lose their job, their car breaks down, they have an unexpected health issue, that they would be joining those 40%. And that's a crisis. And this has ripple effects on every other issue we have: healthcare, education, every part of society. The flip side of that is that if we solve economic insecurity directly, if we just take care of this in the most direct way we can, then that's going to have positive ripple effects through everything we do. And we can do that through an idea called universal basic income. This is the idea that everyone should be granted income security through just regular cash payments, maybe once a month. And we tried this in the 70s, actually. The US and Canada did some trials. There are trials going on right now all over the world. And we also have data from the Earned Income Tax Credit and other cash programs like the Child Tax Credit that show what happens when you provide just a little bit of income security. On education, people stay in school longer, they stay in school longer, they're more likely to graduate high school and finish college. Workers are better able to advocate for themselves. This is a way that we can reinstill wealth that was robbed from African American communities, from slavery to Jim Crow to today's system of mass incarceration. When people can take risks, they start companies, they invest in themselves, and we're all better for it. This is an idea whose time has come. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I'm borrowing this. Hola. Buenos dias. Thank you guys for coming this morning. I'm Cheryl Fed. And, you know, I grew up in Missouri. And in Missouri, I'm from Puerto Rico, but I grew up in Missouri. And in Missouri, it's called the show me state. So we grew up with a very simple principle. And, you know, words only mean so much. There's 3 simple things that my mother taught us. Do it, show it, and prove it. Policies only do so much. Policies only do so much. There's a policy that says that police aren't supposed to beat people and kill them, but it happens. There's policies that says that every child is deserving of equal education, but it doesn't happen. So you have to get on the ground and you have to do the work. So I get on the ground and I do the work, which is what I've been doing for the last 25 years. I get on the ground and I work with the Racial Justice Coalition and I make sure that the policies that we put into action are actually being done. I've been on the ground with immigration rights. Everyone says that they believe in immigration, but how many of them show up at the Immigration Rights Alliance meetings and get on the ground and do the work in the community? How many people actually who say they believe in education get in the classrooms and teach the students? Get in the classrooms and help students learn how to read. Get in the classrooms and do the STEM work with the students. Get in the classrooms and tutor and mentor. I've mentored 1,100 children because I'm a molecular cell biology major and I want the students to see that they are capable and that they are willing to do the work. I've mentored, I've done the work. I've been a contract administrator, I've been a contract negotiator for 25 years, and I've done work in this community. I invite you to listen today. This is what I'm here for. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me. My name is Buffy, it is my real name, in case you're curious. I'm born and raised here in California. I grew up in a trailer in a working class family in the Sierra Nevadas. My dad worked for the U.S. Forest Service for 35 years fighting wildfires. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom until she decided to become the first person in her family to go to college. She went to our local community college and it took her about 8 years, but she finally got her degree. I went to that same local community college, and when I graduated with my 4-year degree, I moved here to the Bay Area and became an organizer in the anti-war movement. It was around this time I had a call from a very good friend. He said, I just tested positive with HIV. Can you pick me up from the clinic? When he got in my car, he turned to me and said, I don't have any health insurance. This was the week we started dropping bombs in Iraq, and I became angry with the direction our country was going, and I decided right then and there that I wanted to have a seat at the table when our country was making these decisions. I became an organizer for Howard Dean's presidential campaign. I then joined the labor movement, fighting for better health care and wages for Walmart workers. I then was one of the early staffers on President Obama's campaign. I was the field director here in California, where I developed the president's community organizing model that propelled him into the White House. And he took me with him. I worked on a lot of things at the White House, but I primarily worked on the Affordable Care Act. I'll never forget sitting in the Roosevelt Room with the President of the United States on a Sunday night in March of 2010, watching those votes come in. When that last vote came in, I realized, 1, my friend would no longer be considered a pre-existing condition, and he would have the health care that is his right. And 2, we have the ability to actually pass progressive public policy that helps people. That is why I'm running for office. We can solve our homelessness and housing crisis. We can ensure equity in education. We can level the playing field for working families. That is why Kamala Harris, Latifah Simon, Irma Anderson, and many others have endorsed my candidacy. I hope you can join me. Thank you.
I think we should give all 9 candidates a big round of applause. They stayed within the time limit as well. We're going to start with the first question. That goes to you. Okay. The first question goes to Judy Appel. Should air quality management districts be allowed to cap refinery emissions? Would you like for me to repeat the question?
No, I have a question. So this is a really good question, and obviously it's very local and really important to this community. And yes, I think that capping emissions is very important. I think that we have to hold our corporations accountable, particularly when they're living in districts that are going to be impacted, so that large corporations like Chevron, like others, are going to be gaining billions of dollars on the backs of our community. So I think it's very important that we stand up as a community and that we use our power as the people. We use our power in Sacramento as well as locally to keep our corporations accountable. So air quality is critical. It's not just critical for us, it's critical for our children, and it's critical for our future.
You know, I had the fortune of working on cap and trade at the California Resources Board, and yes, absolutely. You know, the way cap and trade works is that you lower the cap periodically, and eventually the polluting instruments are phased out of existence. So that's how we do it. That's our mechanism. And so the battle over, over the air districts and the control of these polluters is one of industry versus health. And I put forward that the health of communities is the new industry. So yes, absolutely. And we need to go a step further and start regulating other aspects of our economy. There are whole sectors that are ignored in the capping of dangerous emissions. And we need to address that and expand the scope of our emissions too, so we get to sulfur dioxide and all the poisonous elements as well. It's a matter of health for our community.
The answer is absolutely yes, but we actually need elected officials to be the policy-making board that hold these refineries accountable. That's what I did in Richmond. I held Chevron accountable to their emissions. In fact, when they wanted to do their renewal project, the reason I voted against it wasn't because I think that they needed they shouldn't renew the refinery. I voted against it because they needed to drop the level of pollution, not maintain it at the current level. And as your assembly member, I will introduce immediately a ban on fracking because we don't need to take incremental steps. We are in trouble. Look at our climate. And so because I'm taking no money from them, I am not beholden to them. I owe them nothing except the people and making sure that we as humans, as a district, stay healthy.
Yes, of course we should. Of course, air districts should have the authority to ban and reduce emissions. That's one of the fundamental reasons why they exist. The reason why that's in question now, the reason why I asked the question, is because the state bill that passed takes away that authority of local air districts. This is what should have happened. I'm talking about the so-called compromise cap and trade bill. Something needed to pass, but what should have happened was the Air Resources Board and the state of California should have instituted a rulemaking on direct regulation of oil refineries to reduce their emissions. That rulemaking would have given more leverage to produce a better bill and therefore keep the authority of local districts to reduce emissions. Unfortunately, they didn't do that. If I was in the legislature, I would have brought together a number of legislators, pushed the Air Resources Board to do that rulemaking, have more leverage, and come up with a better, stronger bill that would have passed by 2/3 vote. And that's what we need in the legislature, people who understand how to get things done and how to work the system well and push it to get strong environmental policy. I've been doing that for 25 years or more on environmental issues. Thank you so much.
Yes, I agree that air districts should have the authority to protect local communities from pollution by putting a cap on pollution. And I also agree with introducing a ban on fracking. I also agree with a personal stance. I've agreed to not take any fossil fuel money in this campaign. And I agree with what Councilmember Kalb said about the process in the legislature. When the legislature preempted our local air district from being able to protect our community from public health pollution, they did that because of basically a give an inch, take a mile strategy. I think it's very important that we have we understand that cap and trade is a small part of the way we obtain reductions in the greenhouse gas reduction program. We really need to have clear reductions that protect environmental justice communities, the most overburdened communities, to ensure that we have healthy and clean environments. Yes, I agree that we should empower air districts to reduce pollution. As a legislator, I'll work with the Air Resources Board to do that.
Nothing is more frightening than when your child can't breathe. And as a nurse at the hospital, that's what we see. We see the effects of air pollution. It's a human being sitting in front of us that can't breathe. And we have higher rates of asthma in both Alameda and Contra Costa County than is really acceptable. And we know that part of that has to do with the quality of air here and the pollution that has been put out. I know you see it, at night being released, and it's terrible. So we need to do what we can for these kids and make sure that they have the air quality that they deserve so that they don't end up at the hospital in the middle of the night. We all ran around with masks the other week. It's not the right way to be. We really need to improve our air quality. It's the right thing to do.
Yes, I absolutely agree with everyone to my right. And let's think about the question from a macro level a little bit. We're asking if some of the richest companies in the world should or shouldn't be able to poison our air that we're all breathing, that our kids are breathing. And the reason that we're even asking this is because those companies have so much power. So we need to go back to the root cause here and reduce the political power of corporations, of the richest people in the state, and make it a state that your voice and my voice counts the same. And once we have that, we won't be asking these questions about whether or not we can be poisoning or these companies should be able to poison the air, unlimited.
I don't think you're going to get anybody who's going to disagree with this recommendation. I do think that the bigger issue is that we shouldn't be arguing on whether it's smaller companies or larger companies that are perpetrators of these green gas emissions. Part of the issue that I have is that where are we finding these corporations? We're finding them in the poorest communities. And we're finding them in the communities that their voices are lost in the smoke. They're not getting heard. And no matter what anyone is saying, I guess my right or my left, they're not getting represented. And they're not getting represented in Sacramento because the people who are saying the right things to you right now are not saying the things when they get to Sacramento. Regardless of what anyone is saying right now, they're not saying the things when they get to Sacramento. I'm a molecular biologist and biochemist, and I'm just telling you that this is what the issue is. Thank you.
The answer is yes. We have to be able to hold our corporations accountable. I've fought the biggest company in the United States, Walmart. I will continue to fight corporate polluters in Sacramento unequivocally. Every child deserves to be able to drink clean water and breathe clean air. We've got to be able to hold our corporations accountable. We need to support renewable energies. We need to reduce our fossil fuel. We need to support the clean energy economy, do everything that we can to level the playing field here and bring back power to the people and take it away from the corporations.
you. The next question will be begun by Mr. Bartlett. Do you support repealing the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act?
I most certainly do. Now, our housing affordability crisis that we have here in the Bay Area is the worst in the nation. And I've honed in on this. And we have three prongs we have to address: production, preservation, and protection. Now, to that end, we've done some good things. In Berkeley, the Tenant Purchase Act, so if someone's going to sell the building, it must offer to the tenants first. That's how you move into ownership, so you can preserve communities and protect them from displacement. However, these laws are prevented from expanding beyond city limits because most of the state is blocked by Costa-Hawkins. The reason I'm here today is because my people are living in Antioch and other cities, and they came to me for help, and I cannot help them because of Costa-Hawkins. So if we can repeal Costa-Hawkins, we can make a real housing policy statewide to protect our people and ensure a prosperous shared future for all Californians.
Repealing Costa-Hawkins is one of the reasons why I'm running for state assembly. We've done some amazing work and created some amazing policies that increase the quality of life for our residents in Richmond. And so passing the first rent control policy in 30 years was no easy feat. But now that we have that in Richmond, we have to repeal Costa-Hawkins so that the local municipalities will have more power to create protections and put protections in place that affect our community. In fact, this coming Tuesday, myself, Councilmember Willis, will be introducing an ordinance, a proclamation, a resolution in support of a statewide Costa-Hawkins. And I'm not sitting here making promises to you. Look at my voting record. Look at what I've done in Richmond for the protection of our tenants. We passed it, first of all, with the city council, but because of lies to the apartment associations, with repeal, but the voters prevailed.
Yes, yes, I support the repeal. Costa-Hawkins gets in the way of allowing local jurisdictions to do the job that the people who elected us locally want us and need us to do. So absolutely. I was the author of a number of tenant protection laws in Oakland. The Tenant Protection Ordinance 2014, we were only the 5th city in the state to do it by the time we passed it, and we got that done on a very close vote. If we can repeal Costa-Hawkins, that gives us some local jurisdictions the ability to do more, and that's what we need to do. We did more on 2016, and I'm going to do more in Sacramento. I'm elected to the legislature. But repealing it, if we can't repeal it, we should modernize it, but repealing is our first choice, and let's do the best we can to put that aside. But then we need local jurisdictions to step up. If you repeal it and local jurisdictions don't do any more, then what have we done? So it's a two-pronged strategy. Repeal it, get local jurisdictions to improve their laws and provide more protections for tenants. I've also got more money into our local budgets to provide legal resources to low-income tenants. Thank you.
I also agree that we need to repeal Costa-Hawkins. When I first moved to the city of Berkeley almost 20 years ago, that was on the eve of the law first taking effect. And I saw how overnight rents skyrocketed in the city of Berkeley about 40%. It was horrible. We had community members sleeping on their friends and family members' couches. People were put out on the streets as homeless, and worse off, there were distortions in the market where landlords would take their units off the market. I think we need to provide that local control back to cities who want to take their affordable housing policies into their own hands. We also need to be spending money at the state level for affordable housing so that we can have whole home supportive services for families who need affordable housing. My record stands clear on this. I fought to expand unfair eviction law protections in Berkeley. I've worked in tenants' rights clinics to advise tenants and advocate for tenants facing threats by their landlords for eviction. That's what I'll continue to do in the legislature.
Yes, I agree with repeal Costa-Hawkins. Housing is so fundamental to a person's well-being. If you don't have housing, then there's so much that you you cannot do in terms of health. I was homeless for a period of time when I was a child, and I know that I got sick a lot, and you don't end up going to school and all of those things. So in El Cerrito, we are working on an affordable housing strategy, and I've been a strong supporter of that because I've seen how people are being priced out of their homes. A neighbor of mine recently had to move because the rent went up. A friend of mine over in Albany, same thing happened to her. So it's happening to everyone, and we all, I think, agree here that we need to work on this issue. It's paramount to everyone's well-being. Like I said, it's the first step to a happy life.
Yes, absolutely, we should repeal Costa-Hawkins. And that's the first step in having a rent control, that can go throughout the state so that people can actually stay in their homes. The fact that there are so many people who feel like they're going to have to move, or if they move, then they're going to leave the state. We have something like half the state is at least considering leaving because of housing prices. And that's insane. We're hurting because of it. And companies aren't moving here because our housing prices are too large and they can't attract workers. So, we need repeal Costa-Hawkins, better rent control. We need a dramatic increase in affordable housing and mixed-use housing. And we need to make it easier for BART to build on their own land, and so that we can have a better integration between our mass transit and our housing system.
The simple answer is yes. However, we need to determine what affordable means. Affordable at $100,000 is different than affordable at $50,000 or $36,000. And there's a misnomer here that says that rent control solves everything. Rent control does not solve everything. There's too many loopholes in rent control. There's too many loopholes in this so-called low-cost housing. When we've sold many of our HUD housing to an investor in San Francisco for under market price in Richmond, so we no longer have hundreds of units available to people who used to live in Richmond who no longer can live there, when we have people in Oakland and Berkeley who can no longer live in Oakland and Berkeley and have been pushed out to East County or Sacramento or Stockton or Patterson, then no, we don't have housing for people. And yes, we do have an East Bay or a West County that no longer lives like East Bay or West County. So,
as someone who grew up in a trailer, I dreamt of having a house made of wood. I understand the desire and the need to have housing security, fundamentally, and I think we need to have a holistic approach in our housing issues. So one, we need to build more homes for low and middle income families, subsidized housing, as well as middle income housing for the teachers and cops and firefighters who are traveling from Tracy and Stockton to work here in these communities. Secondly, we have to do everything we can to guard against displacement. That does mean reforming Costa-Hawkins. We want to make sure that rent control is benefiting the people that it needs to be. We shouldn't have people that work in the tech industry that have had their apartments for 15 years that are now making 6 figures living in rent-controlled apartments. That's not what it's for, so we need to figure out how to adjust for that. We should also look at a legal fund to help renters who are being kicked out of their apartments by unscrupulous landlords. We should also look at expanding the renter's tax credit. It's a holistic approach. It's a crisis that we're dealing with, and we have to solve it together.
He's on his feet.
On some of the questions that are yes or no questions, you should feel free to use the congressional approach. I yield back the balance of my time.
I appreciate that. So, I agree that we need to repeal Costa-Hawkins, but I also agree that we have to have a multi-layered, complex approach. Displacement in our community is one of the top most issues that's of interest to us. I mean, we can all see our communities changing, very quickly. And the only way that we can do that is by creating more opportunities for affordable housing in the districts where we live. And that means doing many things. It means, yes, repealing Costa-Hawkins, but it also means that we really need to work with local jurisdictions. I think there are things we can do in Sacramento that incentivize people to have rent control. We need to build more affordable housing. We need to build housing at many different levels. And then we have to help families be able to get into and stay in that housing. We have to create supports that if people are in jeopardy, if they're in crisis, if they can't pay a month's rent, that we can help them with housing security and sustainability. Some of these answers aren't easy. They're not all going to please everybody, but our number one approach has to be to increase our housing stock for working families.
Javanka Beckles, do you support race-based affirmative action?
So we had, right, Papua, we had 109 that, 209, pardon me, thank you very much. And since then, we've seen tuition drop, not tuition, but enrollment drop at our major universities. And so it's not working. And I think that what needs to happen is we know that it's unfair. We know that, we as black people, brown people, people of color, we know that we get treated, that the race isn't fair, but there has to be a policy that really creates fairness and not take us back the way that happened. And I believe that there's obviously an error in the way that was created, because when something isn't put in place to supposedly protect communities of color, but you're seeing that that's not working, then it's not working.
The answer to your question is absolutely yes. When 209 was on the ballot a number of years ago, I campaigned against it, and one of my priorities is to actually repeal it. The state legislature needs to step up and not be afraid to put something on the ballot to repeal Prop 209. It's long overdue, it's never needed, it's harmful, and I'm going to be a leader in the effort to repeal it. Right now, local jurisdictions, universities, and what have you, are using kind of proxies. We'll try to encourage people from certain parts of the state or certain school districts to be a proxy for the problems, the ridiculous reality of institutional racism over decades and decades. Or we focus on local jurisdictions. We'll try to get local small businesses and focuses. Those are all just proxies. Those are trying to get around the Prop 209 law. We need to take that head on. I'm going to be a leader in working with people throughout the state in repealing Prop 209 so we can have a real affirmative action back in our state.
I also agree we need to repeal Proposition 209, and the legislature needs to give that, put that policy in front of voters, and I believe it will pass. When I experienced this personally, it was being enrolled in the first class at UC Berkeley without the use of affirmative action, and it impacted my education. I feel like we are robbing the equity values of our state. We are not providing equal opportunity for entrepreneurs who want to participate in the business and economy of our state, and we need to use affirmative action to provide for equity for all Californians.
Yes, I believe we should have race-based affirmative action. Ultimately, it's about representation. Are you going to be represented at your workplace? Are you going to be represented at your school? Are you going to be represented by public representatives, such as us sitting up here? If Tony Thurmond moves on from the seat, we're going to have very few African American leaders left in Northern California of that stature. So I'm asking you to think about that when you put your vote down, that we do need representation. And I'm asking you to please consider affirmative action as a way of your thinking as well.
Yes, I also believe in race-based affirmative action. Diversity makes all of us better. This is not something where it's one group of people against the other. This is something where we're all stronger for it. And we also need to come to terms with the fact that our laws from the very beginning have been written by white people for white people. And sometimes that's explicit, back in the day. And more recently, it's not explicit, but it's certainly implicit. And so we need to be direct about combating that and about reversing that tide so that diversity permeates throughout every part of our culture.
I'm going to surprise you and say I agree. As a Latina black woman, Muslim, I'm going to agree, and I'm going to take Rochelle's comment just a step further, because the Democratic Party has a problem with diversity, especially considering in California this supposed liberal progressive haven that has a very small percentage of people who look like me in its legislature. And the fact that we have even Minnesota that has more diversity representing its state at the state level and at the federal level. Think about that, California, when you want to talk about affirmative action or when you want to talk about diversity. You think about that.
I unequivocally support affirmative action. In 1997, 20 years ago, I was part of a lawsuit at my university on behalf of the ACLU to support affirmative action at my university. The truth of the matter is we have massive racial inequities within our education system, within our criminal justice system, within our corporate boards, and it's pervasive across our society. We have to have a real honest conversation about that. We've got to level the playing field for people of color in the United States. And we are all stronger when we have schools that reflect the diversity of our state and of our communities. And so I would support repealing Proposition 209. I think this is critical, and I would go and fight for that in Sacramento.
I mean, clearly we need to have race-based affirmative action. And for me, it's not about because it's good for all of us to have diversity or like it impacted my kids or will impact my kids' experience. It's because we have a society, we have a legal system and a social system that is built on institutional racism. And that is why Prop 209 passed. I worked really hard to fight against the end to affirmative action, and I was crushed when we lost that. And I agree that we can go to Sacramento and we can try to bring that back and bring back affirmative action, and I think we can do it. But that's not enough. We need to be looking at every single decision that we make around the laws that are going to impact people, about how we're legislating, and we need to really bring back equity, not equality. And I think that's why both Eva, Jefferson Patterson, and Van Jones have supported me and endorsed me in this race because they know of my deep commitment to those values.
Yes, you know all about it. Listen, every law I write has three guiding principles: innovation, opportunity, and inclusion. And so, and this law I'm going to describe right now comes to all three. So my very first law, the very first one I wrote and passed unanimously in Berkeley, was the creation of the Berkeley Inclusion and Diversity Index, the BINDEX. And this is affirmative action, returning to Berkeley. And we found a novel way to get around Prop 209. If you can show that you've been favoring white males over everyone else, then you can remediate that. And now the doors are open for minority contractors, black-owned businesses. That kind of template needs to go further as we dismantle and destroy Prop 209 and create a whole new tranche of opportunities for people to get included in the opportunity of the richest state in the country. I'm 100% about that. Thank you.
Dan, Dan Calm, do you support increasing per pupil spending in California to $20,000 for the year 2020 by by the year 2020?
That'd be great. That's a big lift. I would certainly put that as a goal. What we should be is, we are something like 45th or 48th in terms of states and how much we spend per people spending. It varies from year to year, but we're certainly in one of the worst 5 states in the country, and we should be in the top 10, if not top 5. So we need to do that as best we can. And if we could repeal the commercial side or reform the commercial side of Prop 13, that will provide billions of dollars more to the state, half of which at least will go to public education. We also have to make sure that people stay in school. One innovative thing that I did as a council member is I created a partnership. I created a partnership with the school district to hire social workers to work with the kids, the families of kids who have the highest rates of chronic absenteeism. By keeping kids in school, it's going to increase graduation rates, and it brings more money to those school districts by increasing ADA for those schools to increase their attendance. So there's a number of things we need to do. One of those things is to dramatically increase per pupil spending, and Prop 13 reform is one way to do that.
I also agree with the goal of 20,000 per pupil spending by the year 2020. I think that ought to be paid with new revenue. I think it would be a challenge to be able to fund that out of the existing state budget, because our state budget funds very important health and human services and funding for other state and local services. But we need to get there. It's unacceptable that we're providing an education to our students that puts our spending in the bottom quintile of education spending in the nation. We need to be at the top quintile of the nation in per pupil spending. My mom persisted as a special education teacher for 40 years, not because of the glamorous salary, but because she cared about the job. But I think we need to recruit and retain teachers who can live in the communities that they work in and have good morale. And the way we do that is by investing in our teachers, investing in education.
I think that's a fantastic goal. And I agree that if we reform Prop 13, maybe we could get there. What I would like to see is the end of disparity. Right now, I feel like you hear good schools and bad schools. And that is so code word for the white schools and the black schools. And what I would like to see is, no matter what neighborhood you drove through, you looked over at that school, and that school had fantastic facilities like this room here. I would like to see the state of California move forward in renovating all of our schools, increasing teacher pay, and increasing all of the needs that kids have, whatever it may be, so that no matter which school you walk into, no matter what race those kids are at those schools, you know you are at an excellent California school.
Yes, I think that's an excellent goal, and one we're going to need if we're going to stay the richest state in the nation. If we continue on our current level of education spending, I don't know where we're going to end up, but we're not going to be the richest in another generation. Let me introduce another idea, which is a child allowance. So we do this kind of at the federal level called the child tax credit. You know, low-income families get a few $1,000s for just to live. At the end of the year. If we made that monthly, just for having a kid here in California, we'd see what we see federally, which is kids stay in school longer, they get better grades, they're more likely to finish high school, more likely to attend college. That's just from a little bit of income security. So yes, absolutely, we should be investing directly in our schools and our teachers, but we can also invest directly in families through something like a child allowance.
Do it, show it, and prove it. Education, if it's most important to us, then we'll include it in the budget. Forget all these rollbacks, forget everything else, just do it, show it, and prove it. We need education, it has to be premier. I have 2 sons at Morehouse College. Well, actually, one just graduated, he's an MBA student. The other one is a civil engineering student in Morehouse and Georgia Tech. My 15-year-old, she's getting ready to graduate Albany High this year. And she's headed for, she's just applied to Stanford as early decision. It can be done. We need to get into the classrooms as parents and as volunteers to help these students out. We also need to make sure that we put the money where our mouth is. If education is important to us, then we will get in there and we will make it happen. Do the work. That's what we need to do here in California. We want California to be AAA rated schools. We need to make sure that we don't just have pretty buildings, that we give the teachers the tools they need to teach our students.
My day job is running a parent organizing program advocating for more funding for early childhood and K-12 in our public education system. And California used to be #1 in the nation, and now we're number 41st in terms of our quality public education. 1 in 4 kids here go hungry. And the truth of the matter is, if you're black or brown, or you have an accent, and you're born in the wrong zip code, the deck of stuff that gets you in this state. It's not what California is about, and we have to fix it. We've got to spend more money on education in our system. We have to prioritize our kids. The way we can do that is Prop 13 reform. That would be $9 to $11 billion a year of commercial property taxes that can go into our education system. We have major racial inequities within our education system that we have to fix. Every school should be great, period. That should be our expectation. Every neighborhood school should be great. Parents shouldn't have to schlep their kids across the district. They shouldn't be forced to make that decision. Their neighborhood school should be great, and that's what we should be fighting for.
You know, I sit on a school board, so I have to make a lot of decisions about where to use the limited funds that we have, to pick between certain programs and other programs, having hard, really wanting to make sure that we're supporting our teachers and paying them a fair wage and balancing that against the programs in our schools, and we shouldn't have to make those choices. So yes, we need to increase the amount of commitment that we have to our schools in our state. Part of that definitely is to make it fair through Prop 13 reform. But we also need to look at our budget as a value document, and we need to value our students and value our schools. It's great to have great facilities, and we have bonds that help with that, and I think that's important, but really our commitment has to go to our teachers. Our commitment really has to go to supporting our classified staff. We have great and incredible talent in this state, but a lot of people are not coming back to not coming to the profession because it's not paying the wages that we need to be paying the people who are really doing the most important work in the state. There's so many amazing initiatives that are going on. We're doing some career technical education. Oh, that's a stop. He said, anyway, I definitely think that we need to increase the commitments to our schools.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. I support that. My mother is an educator, has been her entire life, and I've seen her through the years turn around failing school after failing school. She's a reading professional. And so I'm very familiar with the abysmal rates of literacy and math proficiency among our people here in California. So I would offer this, not just an increase of $20,000 per pupil, but apply a racial and geographic equity lens to that funding. Go a step further and make sure it really gets there. So that dovetails with our last question about reforming Prop 209, because this is part of the penumbra of equity-based solutions to make shared prosperity a reality for all of us. So thank you.
The answer is absolutely yes, and you've heard it from the other candidates. The solution is through reforming Prop 13. We absolutely need elected officials at the state level who are going to prioritize students, prioritize teachers. We live in the 6th largest economy in the world. There's no way that we should not have enough money to spend on our students. I'm a big advocate, big fan of public schools, and so I believe that we need to have a moratorium on charter schools. When we do that, we'll have the money that we need for our students.
Farm workers were required to pick grapes during the recent Northern California fires. What would you do to ease the burden for farm workers?
First, I think that it's abhorrent that workers were forced to...
Excuse me. I put the emphasis on the wrong interpretation. What would you do to strengthen farm worker protection, not ease the burden?
Thank you. And I think that what I was first reacting to was how horrible it is to be forced to work in an unsafe workplace. And what I've encountered when I try to use the Private Attorney General Act enforcing OSHA laws as a private matter, because right now Cal OSHA has a substandard budget. There are good people at OSHA that proceed with investigations, but there are not enough investigators. They do not have the right political direction to proceed aggressively and find employers that abuse their workers. We need to have stronger private rights of action to be able to enforce unsafe workplace laws. We would have very strict penalties on employers that put their workers in harm's way. So that I'm outraged to hear that that was a widespread practice, and I will introduce legislation that will strengthen our workplace protections, strengthen private rights of action to be able to enforce our workplace laws.
I think that's absolutely shocking and horrible. And what it makes me think of is, well, who is representing them? Because one farm worker obviously cannot stand up to whoever was making them work that day, but if they were organized and had a union, then collectively they should have been able to go on strike, because that is definitely unsafe, unfair labor conditions. And so what I would do to further strengthen that is to make sure that all workers, no matter what field that you work in, that you have that right to collective bargaining. Because I think it shows in this absolutely nasty example, but it goes throughout the whole state in terms of, you know, how do all of us stand up for protections? We have to stand up for protections together. And I will fight for collective bargaining. Thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We need stronger rights to collective bargaining. We need stronger enforcement of the laws we already have. I'd also just ask that we think about at what point do we start calling this slavery? When you are working under a giant fire cloud, I mean, what more do we need? So one thing one point I want to make here is that if we had a universal basic income, people would be able to better advocate for themselves. So there are so many people who have to take the first job that they get offered, and if they lose that job, they're pretty much screwed. You know, when the rent comes due or when they have to go to the grocery store next time. So if we just provide a little bit of economic security, no matter what your situation is, then you can tell your boss, no, I'm not going to do that because it's dangerous and it's inhumane, and I'm taking my family, I'm getting out of this smoke cloud.
I've just spent the last almost 15 years as an EEO officer, and spent the last 25 years working in compliance in federal contracting. And so one of the missing elements here that most people may not recognize is that most of these workers were undocumented workers. So working in immigration rights and working with the Immigration Rights Alliance for the last few years is that many of them won't complain. They won't complain because they're afraid. And so what I would do is work with that, go straight to the Oakland Federal Building and upstairs on the 12th or 14th floor and speak with my good friend Lisa Frey-Cardin or with the U.S. Department of Labor, OSHA Division, and talk to her about some of the conditions that these workers have been subjected to, because I know that they would also be protected and they wouldn't be turned over to the federal authorities.
So 3 things. Unequivocally support collective bargaining. I come out of the labor movement. That is something I'm committed to. I will do everything I can to strengthen those laws in any way, shape, or form that I possibly can. Secondly, a lot of these workers are undocumented and they're scared. And a lot of these women are also victims of sexual assault in these fields. And we have to do everything we can to tackle that crisis. These women are scared, they need a voice, and they need strength. Thirdly, and this is broader, but the threat of automation. As technology disrupts our industries, how is our public policy keeping up with that to protect our workers and to provide the necessary social safety net? How are we innovating from a public policy point of view as the workforce changes? And this will impact farm workers in particular. Those are the 3 things I would do.
So before I came back to the country and got my law degree, I got my undergraduate degree in agricultural ecology, where I was working directly with farm workers, largely in the Pajaro Valley. And so, although this is an extreme example, there are many, many situations where farm workers are subject to egregious health conditions without the protections of either their collective bargaining or of the laws or the regulations, and they're afraid oftentimes to respond. In this particular instance, where we have a really immediate crisis, an immediate emergency, that is where the state government can really step in and provide direct emergency protections for workers. We should not be sending workers into any working situation where their lives are at risk, and especially those who are the most afraid. So I think here, that all of the things that everyone else has said, I completely agree with, but in this instance, I think it really took the state government to stop those practices.
Yes, my father spoke at Cesar Chavez's funeral, and this is something I'm very familiar with, and it's happening every day in all sorts of situations, both indoors and outdoors. And there's a few things I see at hand here. One, the ability, because the employers have money for lawyers, but the low-income workers do not. So in Berkeley, we created the anti-harassment ordinance with Andy's help. Thank you, Andy. And that created a right of action with attorney's fees. So even the little guy can get help. So we need to expand these causes of action for them. And also, again, referencing Cheryl's point about the undocumented, that's no joke. So we have to take our sanctuary city template and our sanctuary state idea, and just last week we passed in Berkeley, from my office, disinvestment from the ICE subcontractors, said they don't even fear the requirements that can speak up without fear. So offering them an ability to speak without fear, to go for their rights, and to get help from a paid attorney is a good solution.
Well, what would I do? I believe in supporting unions, and I believe in strong unions. I also believe that police officers shouldn't be the only one with a Bill of Rights. I think all workers should have a Bill of Rights that protects them from these types of, awful, unjust policies that forces them to work.
What happened was unconscionable. There should be, if there aren't already, there should be civil and criminal penalties for that kind of behavior on the employers. There should also be, whether someone's documented or undocumented, there should be mandatory sick leave available for every worker in the state, no matter what kind of job they have. Right now, we don't have that. Many jurisdictions do, many certain industries do because of collective bargaining, but for the most part, we don't have required sick leave available, and that's going to change if I have my way in Sacramento, that will change. Also, as an elected official, you have a certain cachet, and so as a state legislator, I will go into the district and visit whoever there is to visit, or talk to my colleagues and go with them to visit those employers and give them the what for. Because sometimes the informal political pressure has just as much impact or more than laws or how laws are enforced. So we need to do all of the above, and that kind of behavior can never be tolerated ever again. Thank you.
Rochelle, how would you increase housing for low to moderate income families in Assembly District 15?
Well, one of the things that we're doing in El Cerrito is we're really encouraging transit-oriented development. So we are going to be putting more housing around our BART stations and our AC transit hubs. And we are going to make sure that a portion of those are affordable for various incomes of families. We are also looking at how to bring forward some sort of possible rent control, as well as housing impact fees, which when we do have housing that's built that is for moderate income levels, how that will affect the city and how we can possibly draw out some more money to do more affordable housing on our own.
Housing here, of course, is a huge problem, and it's no one solution is going to be the silver bullet. We need a holistic approach. So, for starters, we need to compel the cities and counties here and throughout the state to actually do their part. Everyone sets a housing goal, and pretty much no one meets it. It's because when you go back to your city and you say, okay, here's our goal, a lot of people say, we like the density the way it is. We don't want to, double our housing supply. And so we need stronger carrots and stronger sticks to actually make that happen. We also just need to get really aggressive with our housing supply. We need a huge investment in affordable, mixed income, market rate, every single element of housing. We need to dramatically ramp up, because what we're doing right now, it's something, but it's not nearly enough. And if we keep at this pace, we're just going to see this problem get worse and worse.
Here's where innovation comes in. I used to work in Silicon Valley for a while. And, all of their residents, all of their workers are coming to our area. They're coming over to Oakland, they're coming to, our little hidden coves, and they're getting the bargain. So this is what you do. You want your workers, they want our land. This is where negotiation comes in. We're glad we have the supply, they have the demand. So you start negotiating with these companies, and you start saying, you need these workers, and you need these workers to have housing. And we have the land. We're going to help you. We're going to help you build housing. We're going to help you house your individuals, and you're going to help us build these homes. You're going to pay a premium for your workers to come across that bay, to come over into our areas, and this is how we're going to do it. And this is where good negotiation, good business people come into play. That's what I've been doing for 25 years.
So I think this is a regional issue. If you look at Silicon Valley, Apple just finished their big headquarters, and it was a $5 billion headquarters, and they were required by local law to have 11,000 parking spots and 0 housing. So where are those workers going? They're going up the peninsula to buy homes, they're coming to the South Bay, they're going to the East Bay. That's one company. So these are good paying jobs, we like that, but where are those folks going to live, right? So we need to build more homes for low and middle income people. I think we need an all of the above approach. We need more money for affordable housing. We need to build middle income housing for the teachers and cops and firefighters who are driving from Stockton and Tracy to work here in the Bay Area. I support the housing package that just recently passed and the governor signed. Scott Wiener endorsed me, our housing champion from San Francisco, because of my position on housing. If you look at San Francisco, 38,000 jobs came in last year, only 4,000 approvals for homes. So we have a major supply and demand issue, and it involves fundamentally building more low and middle income housing.
I think everyone here agrees we need to build more housing. And I think the thing is we need to really be strong in our policies about density and about transit-oriented housing. Housing and housing accessibility, part of it is having the unit, and the other is having transportation that is clean transportation and accessible to where you live. And one of the things that we need to really address head on is NIMBYism in our communities, because the more that we have communities fighting against density in our neighborhoods, particularly around transit, the more and more difficult that it's going to be to actually build the housing that we all say that we want. And, so in building housing, we have to really look at some very creative ways to finance housing. Because with the end of redevelopment, the ability to build affordable housing has become much more difficult to finance. So one of the things that we're lucky to have here is we have a new bond that we can use to help finance affordable housing here, at least in Alameda County. We're going to have a state housing bond that we're going to have to be able to help pencil out more affordable housing in the near future, so we need to figure out how to leverage that. And I've been working on student housing in Berkeley, and that's another.
Thank you. Yes, so again, produce, protect, preserve. Those are the 3 housing portfolio doctrines that we work with here. Now, many cities are not adding housing, but some cities are. And the ones who aren't housing it, we're bearing the brunt of it. We're facing displacement, we're getting outproduced, and we're getting displaced. So one way to do this is to create a series of regional housing trust funds, so when this town over here doesn't build, they pay into a fund that facilitates affordable housing development over here. Another way is to just get serious about the money.
While it requires cities to build housing in the aggregate, it doesn't really have a clear requirement to require cities to build low and moderate income housing. We need to fix that and make sure that our needs for all income levels are addressed.
Okay. Owen, what are your top 3 criminal justice reforms?
All right, that's a good one. Top 3, okay, end cash bail. That is a terrible system that keeps people locked up just because they can't afford a little bit of money to get out of jail. It's terrible, it's regressive, and it keeps poor people poorer. 2, find ways to dramatically reduce our incarcerated population. In the 70s, it wasn't like this. And all of a sudden, we got private prisons. We had a massive increase in policing. And all of a sudden, people, and of course this is especially people of color, started ending up in prison, and that robbed wealth from communities of color for generations. And last one is to invest heavily in alternatives to incarceration. Prison should be the absolute last resort, not the first thing we do. And especially, and again, we see along those racial lines. So that's got to change, and it's got to change from the ground up.
Eliminate the barriers for reentry. The 48,000 unseen items that many people don't know exist that prevent people from fully integrating back into society. Reducing the number of our youth that are going through the juvenile criminal justice system rather than having alternatives for them instead of incarceration. And ending the, so that's the mass incarceration, just to let you know. And ending the money bail system, doing something other than forcing people to be imprisoned because they cannot afford to pay until they go to trial.
So we have a mass incarceration problem in our country. The United States is 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the prison population, and it falls along racial lines. 1 in 17 white men will go to jail, and 1 in 3 black men will go to jail. There are major racial inequities within our criminal justice system that have to be addressed. So a couple ideas. 1, we've got to reform bail reform, as mentioned. This is critical. 2, we have to directly address the implicit bias that exists within our system. At every step of the way, from arrests to booking to sentencing to parole, there's implicit bias that exists and falls along racial lines, and this is critical that we address this. Lastly, we've got to support adult school and reentry programs. We can't expect folks to come out of prison without having the education and training they need to be successful and expect them not to go back. And so we must support those programs, and I think it's absolutely critical we do that.
So I recently learned that of students of color who graduate high school are 21% likely to end up in the criminal justice system, and those who don't are 70% likely to end up in the criminal justice system. So I think the first thing that we need to do is we need to end the school to prison pipeline. People don't usually see that as a criminal justice issue, but it absolutely is. The second thing is that we have to address reentry. We have to look, they do their time, and then it's impossible to get back on your feet. It's almost like we're pushing people back down instead of giving them an opportunity to rise up. So that's the second thing. People need to be able to get a profession, a house, get their kids back at a home. I said a house, a home. The third thing is that we need to look at our alternatives to incarceration. I've done a lot of work with restorative justice in the schools as well as in the community and alternatives to incarceration. So we need to stop locking up our young people. We need to stop locking up people and give them an opportunity to succeed.
Thank you. First off, yes, no money bail. It goes without saying. Third, I support the right to vote for people in prison. That's coming on the ballot. I carry that. I support that. All about it. It's important because if you can vote in the prison, you become integrated back to society in multiple ways. And also, people like us, politicians, will listen to you and help your plight because you vote. Third, taking this whole deal of this prison as a place of punishment and isolation and degradation and a continuation of the slave plantation idea is you got to create social impact bonds, truly embrace it from the state level, where you can flip the model of prisons on its head. And prisons are now funded by their ability to reduce recidivism and produce people who can feed their families when they exit. That's what we do. Thank you.
My top three: number one, end private prisons. Number two, and our bail bond system, because we all know if you're poor, you're going to be in jail for a long time. But if you're rich and you're able to afford to pay that bond, bail, you'll be out. Sandra Bland probably would not be dead today if she were able to afford that $2,000 bail that they had on her. We also need true expungement. You know, cannabis is legal now. People who went to jail for that should know their records should be sealed and expunged. But in addition to that, I also believe that we should have probations for over a year. I've got long stories of the kids that I work with who are on probation for almost 2 years, 3 years. It's ridiculous and it's not right. As well as having a statewide ban in the box for housing and employment.
There's certainly more than three, but let me just do three. Number three would be expand down the box and clean slate reform. If people get out of prison or out of jail and they can't get a job because of their past record, even though they've served their time, what do we expect? We're going to see high recidivism rates for someone. So that's a no-brainer. Expand down the box, expand clean slate policy so people can actually make something of themselves after they get out of prison or jail. Two, sentencing reform. We have determinate sentences, we need indeterminate sentences, so judges and DAs and public defenders can work together to give appropriate alternative incarceration, alternative programs instead of incarceration, instead of just the max. Three, or one, I should say, is I took a tour of San Quentin with Lana Hancock last year. The rehabilitation programs at San Quentin are very effective. They reduce recidivism. We need to expand funding for those programs in all the state prisons, as well as reentry services in and outside of jails. People need to be prepared, and a lot more.
I agree with all the comments that have been stated so far, and to prioritize these, I'll borrow from what Cheryl said. We eliminate the barriers to reentry. As somebody who's re-entering our community may only receive $200 on a bus ticket. But what we know is that that is not any type of solution to being able to get back on your feet. So we need to be reaching people in the prison and in our jails far earlier to be able to help people obtain a GED, to be able to prepare for careers, to be able to prepare for entering into human services. And we need to be funding those programs effectively. We also need to be making sure that we're preventing people from going into this school-to-prison pipeline to begin with. And I think that starts young. That starts with investing in education. That starts with having a full supportive services for our youth to make sure that we don't have youth following that track. We also need to do sentencing reform as well.
When you grow up with traumatic events, you oftentimes have difficulty concentrating in school. And instead of punishing these kids and putting them in that school-to-prison pipeline, we need to invest in our kids, we need to have counselors, we need to have mental health and health care on campuses, and that's the first step to stopping kids, mostly kids of color, from ending up in prison or jail in the first place. Second of all, we need to end the war on drugs, because really what it is a war on people of color. And it didn't do any good for me to have the war on drugs. All it did for me was
have a stigma to the problem that my mother was suffering from. So we need to stop the war on drugs. If we stop the war on drugs, we can get a lot of people from ending up in jail in the first place. And third, we should, in private prisons, I agree with that, because no one should be profiting off of putting people in jail. No one should be profiting off of locking people up.
Cheryl, what would you do to bring a full-service hospital to West Contra Costa County?
My question. Do it short, prove it. The budget reflects the priorities of the community. So, you have to start with the budget. You have to start with the budget. If the people need a full-service hospital in the community, you bring a full-service hospital into the community. You start with the budget. You budget it in, you speak to the people who need to bring the community. This is part of what our Board of Supervisors need to hear. When they needed a hospital in East County, they have a hospital in East County. When they need a hospital, Walnut Creek has one, West County needs one. That needs to be a priority in West County, needs to be in the budget, and whoever our assembly person, Cheryl Suddick, needs to be, then Cheryl Suddick needs to be in Sacramento fighting for that, and she needs to be held accountable to make sure it's here.
We have a lot of hospital closure problems in the area, and it's a moral crisis in my opinion. We shouldn't be having to go, if you're in an emergency and you have a heart attack, you shouldn't have to drive a half an hour to a hospital when you're in a crisis like that. And so as a state legislator, I would do everything I can to bring together all of the parties that be at the local municipal level, the private sector, the hospitals, the state, to ensure that we are serving our citizens the right way. I would look at research in terms of determining how many hospitals we need within dense areas to make sure that we're serving those folks. As more people move into this area, as we're building more homes, which we want to do, how are we building the infrastructure to support that? Both with our hospitals, with our cops, our firefighters, our schools, across the board, we need to make sure that we have those services that are critical to the citizens of this community.
This is an excellent question because health equity has to be where we focus this inquiry in our plans. You know, we have to make sure that the people who are in the communities, particularly low-income communities and communities of color, are able to access high-quality health care. And there are healthcare deserts throughout this state. When I worked at the California School-Based Health Alliance, I met so many children who didn't have access to quality health care, and that is the concern. That's what's happening here. So as an assembly member, that means working together with healthcare providers, with our unions, with the local government, with our state coffers, to make sure that there are hospitals in communities that, you know, the hospital industry might not find the most profitable, but it shouldn't be about profitability. Healthcare is a right, and so it would be part of my job and my responsibility as your assembly member to have those conversations to bring back a hospital to this community.
Thank you. You know, these emergent health deserts are just part of a continuing tradition of disinvestment and outright war on people of color. And it's got to be stopped. We have to win that war. Now, here's one thing that I've been working on for more than a year and a half now, on utilizing a new thing called Enhanced Infrastructure Finance District, the EIFD. What it does, it allows us to do a really flexible, sort of create a zone for some kind of development, whether it's housing or hospitals, and then issue bonds against it, around it. It's super flexible. It can span the entire East Bay, connecting network hospitals. I think that's what we're going to go to. So the hospital we will get here will be 21st century and will serve all of our needs. And we will end this disinvestment and outright war against people of color. The wellness economy, as I said earlier, is the new economy.
There are three things that's necessary for a healthy community: hospitals, good schools, and libraries. That's what we need for healthy communities. And the communities that tend to not have hospitals tend to be those communities of color. And so in the same way that we have community hospitals, we have the one, not community, but county hospital. So we have a county hospital all the way in Martinez. If I have a heart attack and I have to go all the way to Martinez, that I'm likely going to die. We're also being threatened with the closure of all debates. That's wrong. These things are just fundamentally wrong, and so I believe that as a state, we have to prioritize funding so that every county should have hospitals that are within, I would say, life-saving miles. And so Martinez is not a life-saving mile if any of us get in trouble, and so there should be at least a county hospital within distance of folks.
Let me give a two-part answer. The first part is, I don't know. I know we need to do it, but I don't have a magic answer. Probably no one else up here does either. If we did have an answer, it probably would be done already. I mentioned earlier that my mother lived in Sao Paulo for 9 years as an older resident of the area, so she used that hospital a lot. And so I have a very personal reason for being concerned about the threatened closures. And it finally closed, it was the third time, if not more, where it was threatened to close. And so I was part of battles in the earlier iterations to keep it open. What I would do as a state legislator, I'd work with the county supervisors, with local officials, with my colleagues in the state legislature, members of Congress, and talk to people who run hospitals, whether it's a county hospital, a full-service satellite of the county hospital in Martinez, or a freestanding nonprofit or even for-profit hospital, whatever it takes to talk to people who run hospitals, who own hospitals, who manage hospitals, public or private sector. We have to make some progress. And so it will be a high priority for me, and we'll just get it done best we can.
This is a top priority for me because communities need hospitals. This is a matter of life and death. This is a matter of public safety. The average American lives within about 3 miles of a hospital. And that's not any more than what we're asking for, to have a hospital within a safe distance. That's why I've initiated studies of the health impacts of the closure of all debates, cumulative with the loss of Doctors Hospital, and to understand the health impacts all across our local area. What we need to do is identify the funding to be able to replace Doctors Medical Center. I rallied to oppose the closure of Doctors Medical Center at the rallies when the community came together, and I'll organize the community to be able to identify the funding both from the county level, at the state level, to be able to change the formulas for when there's a particular kind of a special district hospital that doctors were suffering from an inadequate, inferior funding formula. I'll fight to change that funding formula in the state legislature to be able to have fairness for West Contra Costa County and have our hospital back.
Every one of us in here has a dollar sign over their head. You have $1 sign, $2 signs, $3 signs, or maybe 0. And that depends on what kind of healthcare insurance you have. And the reason why Doctors Hospital closed is because they primarily serve those Medi-Cal or $1 sign kind of patients. Until we fix our healthcare system and all of us have the $3 or $4 or $5 signs over our head, we're not going to convince the corporations to come into poor neighborhoods and build hospitals. So when I go to Sacramento, my top priority will be fighting for single-payer, Medicare for all health care. And we will, like I said before, we will not have the services that we need until we fix our system. And please, do not go to Contra Costa Medical Center if you're having a heart attack, because they do not have a cardiac catheterization lab. You will die. Okay? Our system is broken. Thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We need to be treating every single person the same, and that should be healthcare should be where that happens first. The fact that people are valued differently and that hospitals are closing here, but not in the richer neighborhoods, and it's very obvious what's going on. So what we need to do is create a study to show the impacts of what happens. The fact that there's no hospital here anymore. What does that mean for the community? And when we show that, then we can raise hell. Then we say, okay, this is inhumane and it's a problem, and we gotta solve it. What does it mean to be the 6th richest economy in the world? Does it mean that our tech CEOs can afford giant islands for themselves? Or does it mean we have single-payer health care, housing for everyone, and economic security as a basic human right?
Buffy Wicks, what would you do to prevent sexual harassment in the California State Legislature?
So I was recently one of about 140 women that signed the letter about the pervasive sexual harassment that many of us have experienced and felt in our work in politics. And having worked in politics for 20 plus years, I have been subject to this myself and know the feeling intimately when you are in a room with someone who's in a position of power who is treating you unfairly and objectifying you. So I know this intimately. I think we need immediate investigations that have teeth into what's happening at the Capitol, what's happening in every industry across the country. I think we're in a very unique moment in time right now where people are finally paying attention to the women who are coming out and saying "Me Too," which, by the way, that campaign was started by an African-American woman 10 years ago. So we need to do everything that we can to give teeth to an investigation, to hold those accountable that are perpetrators of sexual assault and sexual harassment, not only in the Capitol, but across every industry in this country.
I don't know a single woman who has not been subject to some kind of sexual harassment or sexual assault. And one of the saddest things that I see is sometimes people will think like, well, I don't know if I haven't like been sexually assaulted, so therefore I'm not a victim of sexual harassment. And that's not true. It's like one of these things that's so internalized that we experience it all the time. And so I also signed on to the Me Too campaign. And what we need, we have to set an example in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. And so we have to make sure that we are holding our electeds accountable. And that does mean that when there is a complaint, that we take it seriously, that we research, that we do the investigation, and then we address it. I talk a lot about restorative justice, and I think that a restorative justice can be helpful. But there are also times when we really have to just make sure that we need to stop the behavior where it starts. And that is with the people who are instigating it. So it's a long time process. We need to do education with our young people, and we need to hold our electeds accountable.
Thank you. This sexual harassment dynamic is the same dynamic we go through on the racial lens. This is, power over another. Unearned power, I might add, too. And so this integral cancer at the root of all of our modern society must be dug out. And so the way it happens, the way it must happen, in my opinion, is that men have to let other men know what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Just the way white people have to tell other white people that racism is not okay. And so, in the state, we need clear laws, we need sensitivity training, we need investigations, and we need accountability. Public accountability. So when the fear of reprisal is gone, then we can start to move the needle on true gender equity in the state capitol.
Well, I believe we prevent sexual harassment by putting more women in accountable positions. That's how we do it. Like me. That's right. It's a cultural thing. We can ask lawmakers to create all kinds of laws and policies, but if we don't, as a society, change the way we think, change the way we treat women, and in some cases, men. Because, women aren't the only ones who are harassed as well. We gotta, so again, this is about education. We have to educate ourselves. We have to change this culture, male-dominant culture. And when we do that, again, when we put more women in these positions of power, we'll start to see those kinds of behaviors change.
There needs to be zero tolerance for that kind of behavior. The solutions are short and long term. In the short term, if there are elected officials who are engaging in that behavior, they need to be unelected. And someone needs to run against them and get them out of office. We already have an example of somebody in Southern California who had some history of this. I hope that person is not reelected. And there are examples of taking people out, and I think that should happen here. And frankly, if they're repeat offenders, we don't need any ban the box for them. We need to be aware of what they've done and keep it on their record and make sure they don't get elected to any office ever again. But there's also some long-term problems. Even if we suppress the behavior, some of these people think it's okay, whether it's entertainment industry or politics, what have you, they think it's okay. Maybe they suppress it, but they still think it's okay. It's like racism. Well, maybe we suppress racism among some people, but they still think it's okay. They still think that way. So there needs to be some long-term education and cultural changes that happen. That's going to take a huge effort over a period of time. But in the short term, and now, we have to have severe consequences. Thank you.
The first step is having a culture that's inclusive, that has no tolerance for harassment or discrimination, and has real repercussions. And as a state legislator, what I would be insistent on doing is contributing to a culture that is inclusive, that's positive. And one thing that struck me was how so many of these incidents took place in supposedly after-hours events where people were acting under the influence. And I think we need to provide opportunities for transparency, for all people to be able to access the process. I think that's important for our government in general. The second thing that I've learned from talking with DAs, from talking with investigators at the Department of Fair Employment and Housing about how to make this process work is we need to have investigating cultures that don't deny the victims and the survivors reality. We need investigations that persist. We need investigations that don't reject the reality of what's going on.
I think this is actually a really good time for women to be entering Sacramento, because prior to this big realization and big outing of the perpetrators, I have to admit I was a little nervous about stepping out of my comfort zone in terms of I've worked with all women for my entire adult career, and I'm proud to say that at my workplace, at least for me, I haven't had to deal with sexual harassment. But going into Sacramento now, the conversation's been opened up. And I think that's the most important thing. It's been cracked open. We have to keep talking about it. And I think the most important thing now is to not let it go and just let it fall to the wayside. We need to find our male allies. And I agree, we need more women up there in order to change the balance of power and make sure that this sexual harassment culture that exists there and across our state ends.
I absolutely agree that we need culture change around this issue, but we also need legal consequences for perpetrators. The reason that this happens so often, so pervasively, is that there are so many people who don't think anything bad is going to happen to them if they commit sexual assault or sexual harassment. So we need strong legal protections for people to come forward, to know that they won't be shamed, to know that they will be defended in court, and that they will have justice done. And so until we have that, maybe people in the public light will feel uncomfortable because they're afraid of public shaming, but what about all those, like small business bosses who can lord over their employees, or the millions of people we're never going to hear about, but who do these kind of behaviors as well? We need to protect the people that we've never heard of.
Okay, but this is real personal for me. I'm an EEO officer, as I told you before, so I do a lot of sexual harassment investigations. I talk to a lot of people. I deal with a lot of people with disabilities. I deal with a lot of undocumented workers. I deal with this a lot. And so I'm just going to tell you this. I know what it feels like to feel helpless in the moment. You're paralyzed even. I've been through this personally. I've been through this. So this is just a real, you move through life, you pretend that you're perfect because people want you to be perfect. They want you to smile and they want you to pretend that everything's okay, but it's not okay. And the perpetrators get to go on. And I just want you to know that sometimes, that Adam's apple, you don't know the difference between that Adam's apple and a fist in your throat. So, the consequences have to be greater than the reward.
In the interest of time, we have to make an allotment for everyone to have a closing statement. On the next three questions, we're going to ask the candidates to answer as close to yes or no without an explanation.
Yes or no?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. First one, we're going to start. Should private companies be allowed to use prison labor?
No.
No, although I have a plan to create shareholder corporations where the prisoners own the company.
Absolutely not.
I would say if the prisoners want to voluntarily do that and get paid at least minimum wage or real wage, not $1 an hour, in those situations, that could be okay if it's a learning experience and they get paid at least minimum wage or more and it's voluntary. Thank you.
No, but I think that Dan's consideration of a truly voluntary ability to work in preparation for reentry is something to explore, but no, we have an abuse going on.
No.
No, but they should receive a basic income.
If they're paid, not a minimum wage, but I say yes, only if they're paid per the wage determination register, which is the federal wage, and benefits, and some of that money goes back to the victims.
We have to protect all of our workers, including prisoners. So I would explore it, but only if there's the right protections for them, similar to what Dan had proposed. And if it's part of a job reentry program, then I think it could be beneficial that they have to be paid a living fair wage in accordance to how we protect all of our workers.
Ben, should California ban fracking? Yes or no?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, I'm going to introduce a bill to ban fracking for oil right away and to phase out fracking for natural gas within 4 years. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can't be too aggressive with our environment.
C.
Absolutely 100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, and this has to be a priority, not only for, yes, and this has to be a priority.
Okay. Javanka, do you support Senate Bill 562, the Healthy California Act? Yes or no?
Absolutely, it's my priority.
Yes, I've been supporting single payer since the late 1980s.
Yes, I support SB 562, a single payer system. I do think the bill needs to have a financing mechanism. I think the nurse's proposal is an excellent start.
Yes, healthcare is a human right unequivocally.
Yes, this is what being a prosperous society means.
Yes, we absolutely need single payer, not only in California, but across the country.
Yes, we need single payer, and I think that we need to have real robust conversations about 562, we need to do it right away.
Yes, and I have ideas to fund it.
Okay. This is not a yes or no question, but we're going to ask the timekeeper to frown. Johannes Meserly shot and killed Oscar Grant here in the East Bay. What would you do to reduce extrajudicial killings by police officers? Dan Carlson.
You need strong
Yes or no?
I don't have a yes or no question, but you need strong police oversight, and that's why I authored the Police Oversight Commission for the City of Oakland that has real teeth in it. A lot more we need to do, both formally and informally, but it absolutely must be reporting. And you could be pro-protecting, anti-crime, pro-police, and pro-police reform. Those things are not at odds with each other.
I think access to citizen oversight boards is very important. Having officer body cameras is important so that we have accountability, we have evidence, and that will discourage misconduct.
I think we need to really work on our implicit bias that we have within the police departments. We need to make sure that officers see every human being that they interact with is just that, a human being, and not treat them as animals or less than that. They shouldn't be able to go ahead without thinking and shoot and end someone's life. I think there's many things that we can do to work on this, and starting with implicit bias, and starting with making sure that those officers think second, have a second thought before they pull that trigger.
Yes, this is another example where people are not afraid of the consequences, and they need to be. So body cameras are a good start, police commission's a good start, but we need to make officers know that if they harm someone unlawfully, that there will be consequences.
This is where the anti-terror police commission comes in. The police commission is good, but the anti-terror police commission is a lot better. And the police need to be afraid that if they shoot someone and it's unjustified, that they won't be able to just say, I was scared, and get away with it. Now, if it's justified, it's a different subject. But if it's unjustified and they shoot and kill someone, they can't just be able to give the party line that I was scared and they get to walk away. There are consequences to actions if a citizen kills someone, and there should be consequences to actions if you are law enforcement and you kill someone. Being trained is one thing. Being badly trained or poorly trained should not be an excuse. The whole idea of implicit bias says that there's something wrong on the other side, rather than ownership of what you have done wrong. So we need to make sure that that's it.
20 years ago, I worked with the ACLU on their police misconduct work. And sadly, a lot of the stuff we saw still exists today. It's just now we see it more because we have cameras. And so we have more purview to what we all know has been happening for a long time. We need implicit bias training within our police force. Desperately, everyone has implicit bias. Everyone in this room has implicit bias. We have to fundamentally address it. We need police oversight, and that should be done by citizens, so I support that. And that absolutely has to have teeth. So those are some of the things I think we need to do.
I've done a lot of work on police accountability, both when I was at the Coalition on Homelessness and since. And so I think a lot of people have talked about some really good strategies. I think one of the things that we really have to address is making sure that police officers who are willing to step up and confront the more aggressive police officers are held up and are protected. I think we need to change the Officers' Bill of Rights so that there's because right now police they're protected so that they're not held accountable by our criminal justice system. We need to be charging and finding guilty police officers who are unjustifiably killing members of our community. And at the same time, we need to be doing training, but not just implicit bias training that people come in as a one-off and do an implicit bias training and people can feel good about the fact they were trained, but really deep, embedded look at how the police culture is reinforcing the racism that drives our criminal justice system.
Thank you. That's exactly right. So Berkeley created one of the first police review commissions in the country about 40 years ago, and I served on it during the time in which we created a body camera policy. Now, one thing we found is that we are completely hamstrung by the state law called the Officers' Bill of Rights, Policing Bill of Rights. So we need to amend that. So there's some accountability. And further, we need to go a step further and make sure that the policemen that come up through the academy are subject to deeper background checks. Because you don't know this, but white supremacy groups have infiltrated all these police departments. In a simple little social media search, you can see that they're members of the X and Y clan group over here. And so, you know, that's Mansour against NAACP's idea. So we need to have that on a robust level, deep background checks to make sure our peace officers are peace officers, not officers of war.
So you have to hold bad cops accountable. And in Richmond, I brought forward a policy that says that if you are shot or hurt by a police officer in Richmond, that's an automatic investigation. If you end up in the hospital after an encounter, that's an automatic investigation. That's what I did at the city level. And at the state level, we have to reform the policeman officer's Bill of Rights, because bad cops use that to protect themselves. And right now, if a police officer throughout the state shoots an unarmed citizen, they get a paid vacation, right? We got to change that. You shouldn't be rewarded for killing unarmed people, because that's a reward. You know, paid leave, that's what they get. And we changed that by reforming the police officer's Bill of Rights that protects bad cops, and we can do at the state level what we've done in Richmond.
Slight amendment to the rule. This is our last question. We want to allot time for your closing statement. We're going to ask each person to answer for 30 seconds instead of 1 minute, and so you can have time for your closing statement. And maybe the timekeeper could be encouraged to say, if you go over, then we'll call that your closing statement. That is the kind of amendment that you should get used to when you get into state legislation. How would you change the authorization process for charter schools? Brother Katz.
I think
30 seconds.
I think we need to stop the State Board of Education from interfering in local control over enrollment in our schools. Let's look at what's happening to enrollment here in West Contra Costa School District. There is arbitrage going on. There was a tax on local revenue and being able to properly fund our schools. So I would introduce legislation that would hold charter schools accountable to holding public meetings inside the district and a whole lot more.
I think we need to stop the new approval of new charter schools, and it definitely shouldn't come from a state level. It should be left at the local level if it's done at all, but at this point I don't think that we need to approve anymore. I think we need to evaluate what they've done to our educational system and make sure that we're doing the right thing for our kids.
I agree that localities should be allowed to stop the approval of charter schools, because that's money that's ultimately getting robbed from our public schools. And the stronger our public schools are, the stronger our communities. And so it's got to start there.
Approval of charter schools should be based on what's needed in the community. So if the charter school is fulfilling a gap in the community for a specific need, then that is foreseeable. But if it's usurping students from the local public schools, then I can see that there's a conflict of interest. But if it is fulfilling a need in the community, then that's something different. But I'm still a supporter of public schools. I don't see a need for it.
If a district's not filling a need and a charter can do that, I support that. I think we need accountability and transparency for the application and enrollment process in particular around charters to make sure that is a fair process. We need to make sure that there's accountability and transparency around high academic standards for charters and for our public schools. And obviously we need to ensure the safety of our students at every school and make sure we're funding schools as much as we can so that every school is great, both local district schools and charter schools.
I'm your public school candidate. We need to make sure that our public school students are well resourced. We're already seeing the decimation of our public school coffers by charter schools throughout the state, and that is deeply impacting our ability to serve our students. So what we really need to do, we need to hold charter schools accountable. We need to have local decisions about when we can end charter schools without taking the power away from local districts, and we need to make sure that we are not privatizing our public school system so that all students are served.
Well, seeing as how we have a limited budget at this point, so any new charter school must replace a failing charter school. Any new charter school must have a plan to address racial equity. And only the kids who are failing can be at those schools, and they must stay there until they're fixed. And also, that's so that's essentially a racial equity lens applied to any new charter school, replacing a failing one that's not meeting demand. But we must check up the status quo because we know who's failing right now, and it's us.
My answer is simple. We implement a moratorium on charter schools, period.
I'll do the following. One, completely take away the ability of the State Board of Education to approve any new or approve any renewals of charters. They should not be within local control, absolutely. Two, if they want to be public schools, if they want to call themselves public schools, they need to adhere to the same laws that the districts have to adhere to, including the Public Records Act and open meeting laws. At full transparency, if they want to be a public school, they have to act like a public school, and that means they can't kick out students because students act out. District schools can't do that, neither should charter schools. We need to stop.
I think we ought to give a big hand to the... And now we're going to go to the closing statements. As we said in the beginning, we started with Sister Appel, and we're going to end with we're going to begin the closing statements with Buffy Wicks.
And stand up.
1 minute each.
So we have 9 great candidates, and I think more joining every day, if anyone else wants to run. And we are all very progressive, and we have progressive values. And that is a great thing for this district, and we are lucky that we live in such a part of the world that that's the case. But the question is, who can actually get stuff done in Sacramento? I have worked at the highest levels of government. I helped build the coalition that got the Affordable Care Act passed. I've also organized at the most local community level, and that is the experience that I want to take to Sacramento with me. The Republicans have done a very good job across this country of dismantling our faith in institutions. And I think we here in California have the ability to demonstrate good progressive governance that includes a lot of the things that we talked about today: criminal justice reform, equity in our education system, solving our homeless and housing crisis. And I would love for you to join Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, Scott Wiener, Tim Farley, Tom Butt, Irma Anderson, and many other local leaders across this district in joining my campaign. Thank you.
You know, I started out by telling you there's 3 things that I like to do. I like to do it, show it, and prove it. And so that's what I want you to remember. You know, anybody can run for office, anybody can tell you things, but doing it and actually getting into the community and listening to people and doing what the people ask you to do. Not coming up with your own policies, not following a template that they sent you from Washington, D.C., not following a template from one city and trying to apply it to another city, but going to every single city in this district and listening to the people and knowing what the people want, because you've worked with every single city and you've worked with the people in all of those cities and you've worked with the children and you've worked with the districts and you've actually done the work in immigration rights and you've done the work in the school districts and you've done the work in the Racial Justice Coalition and you've done the work and you're ready to apply that and you can negotiate, because that's what you've done for the last 25 years. Thank you.
You know, these days started some revolutions in the past, and I'm asking us to start one more. We can be the state that declares economic security a human right. We absolutely have the wealth to do this. We are the richest state in the richest country in the world, and yet we have tent cities. We have people suffering. We have people who have a brilliant idea for a company or an app, but they're working their minimum wage job because that's all they can do right now. We need a state where people are prosperous, where they are guaranteed housing, health care, and economic security, where people can take risks. And that's going to lead to stronger communities and a better California and the true meaning of prosperity.
My name is Rochelle Pardue-Okimoto. I've been a nurse for the last 17 years. Our healthcare system is broken. Right now, you better know which hospital you better go to, depending on your ailment. If you have a heart attack, go to Summit in Oakland. If you get in a car accident on the 80 on the way home, you're going to come up with a helicopter, pick you up, and take you to John Muir in Walnut Creek. That recently happened to one of the clerks in El Cerrito when he got shot. If you have a baby, you need to go to Alta Bates. Healthcare for all, single payer, Medicare. Please join my campaign with the California Nurses Association, Assemblymember Sandra Swanson, the California Legislative Black Caucus, Mayor Janet Abelson, and Paul Fideli. I think he already stepped out, but thank you.
We need a leader who will take on tough fights and take action for progressive change. And in my career on the East Bay Municipal Utility District Board in my third term as a workers' rights attorney, that's the record that I've had, and that's what I'll continue to do for you in Sacramento. I've passed stronger protections for communities suffering from increased air pollution, cleaning up our air. I've passed minimum wage ordinances when those debates were threatening to have the whole deal collapse. I intervened in those negotiations to be able to get tough things done, and that's what I'll continue to do for you in Sacramento, to get single-payer health care, increased funding for education, and strengthening workers' rights in our environment. Climate protection is critical to me, and I'll work hard to make sure that we have an upgrade to our climate protection and clean energy laws. Thank you. Please take a look at my website, ndcaps.com.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the sponsors for hosting and thank the host for hosting. I've worked for 5 years at a community college, so I have a warm feeling and a strong commitment to our community colleges throughout our state and the Bay Area. A lot of us have a lot of great ideas, but not all of us have the same amount of experience implementing those ideas and getting them actually into law. I have nearly 30 years of policy and organizing experience, 10 years in Sacramento, working on legislation, understanding how the process works, and be able to push that to get significant bills passed or good amendments into bills and stopping some bad bills from passing. I also have a very strong record in Oakland. Oakland, the largest city in the East Bay and the only city that has full-time city council. I took on the coal industry and developers and stopped a coal terminal. I was the lead in stopping a coal terminal from being pushed into Oakland. I took on the police union in getting a ballot measure on the ballot and passed by 83% of the vote to create a civilian police commission for the first time. I took on certain property owners, landlords, to have stronger tenant protections. I took on utilities up in Sacramento and to get strong additional legislation for renewable energy. Please look at my record and my website. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Proven long-term record is what I bring you. Now, we all sound alike. I know you all, every answer was pretty much the same thing. What is it that separates me from my colleagues here? Good people, all progressive. What separates me is my proven long-term track record of standing up to corporations. And so when I say that I'm a corporate-free candidate, that's the reason why I have the endorsement of community-oriented organizations. Like, I am the only candidate endorsed by Bernie Sanders, Our Revolution. I am the only candidate in California endorsed by this organization. I've been endorsed by ACE, I've been endorsed by the Richmond Progressive Alliance, I'm endorsed by 4 city council members, all the 4 progressive city council members on the council. And when I say that I will work for you, I will advocate for you, and I will be on boss and on broad.
Listen, the stakes are high. A few weeks ago, a study came out that says that in 35 years, African Americans are going to have a median net worth of $0. And then 20 years later, Hispanics will follow suit with $0 median net worth. That is a catastrophe. And everything I'm about in office and as a human being is about preventing that, because that's a cycle to an earlier time that we do not want to revisit. That's why Mayor Jesse Arreguin of Berkeley, former Congressman Ron Dellums, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Fred Blackwell, Cheryl Perry Loeb, President of 100 Black Women, all endorse this campaign because it's going to take innovation, creative thought, power, and the ability to harness this super genius we have in the East Bay and launch it to the next level for all California. Thank you. BenBartlettCA.com.
Thank you. You see how they save the best for last. So, you know, we have a lot of progressive candidates here, and we're all going to say the things that most of the people in this room are going to believe in. But the thing is that I have been doing this work, this hard work with and for this community and the people throughout California for 25 years. You know, we are in a situation now nationally where we're in a state of crisis nationally, and we need for California to be a strong, bold, progressive state, and we absolutely need for the leader in this district to be the beacon, the guide star for leading this state for an alternative to what's coming out of DC. And I'm your candidate who can do that. I want to bring early child education to every child. I want to make sure our working families are protected. I want to stand with our students so that they have access to high quality education, and I want to make sure that we fix our criminal justice system. I'm the person who builds relationships and can really get things done, and I want to ask for your support. You can find out more about my campaign at judyapel.com.
How many of you think that they all, since we're in a college campus, how many of you think that they passed the first test? Before I turn the microphone over to Tanisha Brown from Mr. Phillips, we want to ask all of the candidates to stay around for a few seconds afterwards so we can take a group picture, and the Post News Group would like to publish a group picture with the word across the top, wanted, all 9 of you. So we want to thank you. We kept within the time limit. We condensed it with yes and no.
Thank you, timekeeper.
So we have a little, is this turn off? Yeah. You don't want to hear me talk, huh? That's true. Okay, so we have a little house cleaning that we have to do. Before we shut down, we're going to bring our vice chair, Ms. Aisha Brown, up.
If the mic's not working, I'm going to
try
to
mics work?
Yeah.
I want to thank all of you for coming out and supporting the African American Caucus. And I want to invite you to come to Millbrae on November 18th. We're going to have a meeting. The executive board for the California Democratic Party will be having a meeting at 8:30. We can get the information out to you. But I'm also going to invite you to join the caucus today. I'll have these at the end. You can come over and see me and grab one from me or from one of the regional directors. And I'm definitely going to ask all 9 of you to join today. Thank you.
So there are a few people who slipped in, and I want to make sure that I acknowledge them. We have J.L. Myrick from Richmond City Council. We have Mr. Mark Williams up top, who's on the AC Transit District Board of Directors. We have Devin T. Murphy back here, who is chair of the California Young Democrats Black Caucus. We have Hillary Crosby, who is the immediate past controller of the California Democratic Party. I saw her, I thought I did. Deborah Vinson? Okay, Deborah Vinson, who is a trustee in the Antioch Unified School District, was here. Thank you. Deborah's good people. We have Valerie Cuevas, who serves on the West Contra Costa Unified School District Board of Education. We have Elaine Merriweather, who formerly served on the West Contra Costa Unified School District Board of Education. And we have my man Willie Robinson, who is president of the Richmond NAACP. I want to once again thank all of the people who actually sponsored this event. That is Contra Costa College, the United Teachers of Richmond, Black Women Organized for Political Action, the El Cerrito Democratic Club, and the Post News Group. So we appreciate you, we thank you, and we love you. And with that, I will bring up our illustrious chair to close this meeting out. Now I'm on the mic. Y'all hear the difference? You didn't hear that echo before when I didn't have the mic and he said I wasn't recording. So I'm now recording. Makes this official. So I want to first thank all the candidates for coming out today. This has been an excellent, excellent. Please put your hands together for all of our candidates. And this could have been done without the hard work of our officer, the African American Caucus and Regional Director. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me thank Mr. Phillips. But two other people that rise to that same level would be our moderator. Please put your hands together for our moderator. And as he stated more than one time, the greatest timekeeper in the history of timekeeping. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Madam Timekeeper. Come on, Madam Timekeeper. That's it. Doing a hell of a job. So I'd like to take a quick point of personal privilege. Flew in from Southern California this morning. I want to thank Mr. for referring me over to, I think it was Sookie's Restaurant and Family. Y'all ain't been to Sookie's? I was at Sookie's, that's pretty good. And of course our shameless plug, but our vice chair did that. We want to make sure that anyone in here today, if you have the opportunity, please take the opportunity to join the African American Caucus of the California Democratic Party. Doesn't matter whether you're a delegate or not, and if you're a Democrat and you want to be a part of something good, like you see here today, please pick up an application. With all the officers, as I point you out, please stand up of the African American Caucus. Mr. Devin Murphy, the chair of the California Young Dems Black Caucus, and remain standing, sir. We also have regional directors. With our regional directors, please stand. I see a couple of regional directors here in the audience. Will you please stand? As well as Mr. Vice Chairwoman who's talking to the moderator. You know, but my real job is I'm special assistant, or my paid job, not my real job. My real job is I'm deacon in Livingstone Cathedral Worship in Livingstone in Little Rock, California. But my paying job now is I'm the special assistant to our California Assembly Speaker, Anthony Rendon. And as the only African American south of Sacramento on the Assembly staff, it's very interesting not only that in the last cycle I was an Assembly candidate, but to listen to all of the different candidates, and perhaps one of you will be the person that I'll get to work with in the new cycle coming up, because if you get elected, you will definitely cross my desk. So it was good to listen to the answers. It was great to listen to the aspirations, and it's going to be very interesting to see how you change that into fruition once you step into that giant building up in Sacramento. But everything that you said here can be done.
I want to point out some of the excellent things that were said by some of the candidates that directly affect what's going on right now. The Democratic Party, as great as we are here in California, it's been touched upon that we too have our issues. We too have a lack of diversity. We too don't have enough women or people of color or African Americans as delegates. And that's going to take all of you getting involved in the democratic process that happens every 2 years when they start electing delegates. Join your county central committees, because you can sit around and talk about what is not happening, but until you step up to the plate and join the party, we will have the disparity that we have today. So some of those things said about the party were right on the money. The sexual harassment that you see the wave of and the 140 women, as an African American male with 5 daughters and 5 granddaughters, let me tell you, me too. Without a doubt. If you're state employee, let me tell you, me too. It happens across the board, not only sexual harassment, but hostile work environments where people of power are able to wield that power uncontrolled and untethered, and it happens to everyone that don't look like them. And you will rarely hear me say that word them, but in this case I think it is appropriate because it is widespread and it is something that now we can do something about. So don't let the conversation stop with sexual harassment. Let that conversation go on with hostile work environments that affect people that don't look like the people in charge. And I really do note that this forum was such a wonderful forum that I thought I'd take down bullet points. I always let the Lord speak to my spirit. I see Hillary back there. Hillary, thank you for always being a part of the African American Caucus and always supporting us and making sure that we were at the top of the list. But I would be remiss not to thank each and every one of you for coming out here today, because it is this type of input, it is this type of involvement that makes sustainable change. Thank you again, thank you again, Madam President. Thank you, candidates, for being at the African American Caucus. And without objection, I entertain a motion to adjourn. It's been moved, it's been seconded. There is no discussion. All in favor? Opposed by like sign, motion passes. Thank you very much.